ladies, gentlemen, people, guests that have joined us via this link, as well as on our YouTube channel live. Welcome to this discussion on MIKTA, which stands for Mexico, Indonesia, the Republic of Korea, Turkey, and Australia. And March this month, we celebrated International Women's Day. It's the month of women. We've had the celebration of languages, and also in South Africa on the 21st, we will be celebrating Human Rights Day. So quite pertinent subject that we have today with regards to MIKTA. And I'm sure the Excellencies have a lot of information and knowledge to share with regards to the subject matters of gender, of COVID-19, which is quite present right now, as well as all these impact on climate and environment, and where does diplomacy fit into all of these subjects. And it's just not a MIKTA issue. It's global issues. It's what we are currently as humanity seized with, and hopefully you can shed some light on the interactions between the MIKTA countries. I just want to try this language sort of thing and try and treat everyone that is represented here in their country's languages. So as Australia takes the chair of MIKTA this year, I'd like to start off with some Aboriginal greetings. If you just bear with me and let me try to say Womanjeka or Yamalundi, Kurumba Biji, and obviously the one that we all know, good day. So, that's something that I thought we could introduce with regards to languages. For Mexico, obviously with the Spanish influence, ¿Cómo está? Buenos días, Excellency, welcome. And also, Mexico has a deep ancient history with the Mayan culture as well. So I looked up this and it says Lakech Alakin, which is also
Yes.
It's also a Mayan greeting. So welcome, Excellency, with that regard. Korea, South Korea, Republic of Korea, was a former chair of the MIKTA grouping, and the greeting in Korean is Annyeong Haseo. Annyeong Haseo, Excellency. Welcome to this meeting, and look forward to your inputs as well. And in Turkey, I always see the Turkish ambassador, and Merhaba is the Turkish greeting that we normally use with Excellency. Welcome, Excellency, and looking forward to your inputs as well. Apa kabar, Excellency? From Indonesia, I've been to Indonesia many times. I have a strong kin with Indonesia. Apa kabar, welcome, Excellency. Ladies and gentlemen, I would also like to introduce Sanusha Naidu from the IDG. She's a senior research analyst at the the Institute for Global Dialogue. She will be giving us some opening remarks with regards to MIKTA. She has extensive experience and expertise in international relations. Having worked in the BRICS and IPSA groupings, as well as from the academic side, she has a master's in international relations from the University of Staffordshire in the United Kingdom, and has previously worked and managed the Foreign Policy Institute, and worked at the Open Society Foundation. She's published quite extensively as well on Africa-China relations, Chinese and African perspectives, and has also been on many, provide analysis on many media and broadcast TV broadcasters. And she's a regular analyst actually on domestic affairs as well. So, Sanusha, I'd like to invite you to please give us your opening remarks. And thank you very much. Sanusha.
No, nadie se ve. No sé.
Sí, es que.
Thank you so much, Kirtan. Thank you for those welcoming words, and to also be part of this very interesting and important discussion this morning. I want to also say that it's been quite an opportunity for me to be sharing a platform with the ambassadors, so all diplomatic protocol is observed, and of course to be sharing my insights on MIKTA, which I haven't really thought about for a bit. And then you guys got me to think about it all over again in the last 24 hours, which is great. So I won't take too much of time. I have about 3 or 4 points in the 5 to 8 minutes that I've been given as opening remarks. And I think the first point I want to make is just the way MIKTA operates in the stylistic operation of MIKTA and the way it positions itself in terms of being a relevant interstate grouping of 5 countries that are identified as middle powers, but doesn't really claim the spotlight or the limelight as we find with BRICS. And I think very often BRICS tends to overshadow other groupings that have emerged as the kind of middle power dynamic in the global governance arena. So I think that for me is quite an important characteristic of the MIKTA grouping, because it remains relevant, but it remains relevant in the kind of informal structure it has, but also a kind of importance that it brings to the dynamics of global governance and international relations and diplomacy. The second point to make, which I find also very important in terms of the idea that was created in 2013 of the formation of MIKTA, was the whole question of sustainability of the grouping. I think there was a lot of questions being asked about whether this group would remain in its resolve, would it remain relevant, would it remain sustained in its actions, in the issues that it discussed, in terms of the kinds of debates it would have in the context of its middle power identity. And it's actually showed its durability. It has basically continued to remain, and it links back to my first point about remaining in the shadows and not necessarily front loading its identity on the global stage. And I think its continuous work behind the scenes is something that we have to recognize as a global grouping. I think the world is big enough for many groupings and of this nature, but unfortunately we tend to just spotlight a few because maybe there are 2 actors or 3 actors in a few that capture our imagination. And I think this is what's so nice about MIKTA, is that all of them are basically on an equal par or equal footing. None of them try to remain the dominant actor within it. I remember one of my professors at Staffordshire telling me about the G7 or the G8. He said there's 1 Snow White and 7 dwarfs. And it was quite interesting in terms of the analogy drawn. I think this is what makes this grouping quite important, is that it remains durable in terms of its identity. And this links to the idea of the convergence and the divergence issue around MIKTA. The one thing that becomes very important about groupings that are formed is the constant question of, do they converge or do they diverge on issues? And with the BRICS, there's always been this idea that it is about the agreement in disagreement that propels the BRICS forward. Similarly, I think with regard to MIKTA, it doesn't mean that you always have to have agreement. It's the divergence that makes the grouping rich in its articulation of issues. And to me, I think that is the resolve of the group, and that is the way in which the group will respond to different issues, particularly now as we move into this COVID-challenged global order. And this COVID-challenged global order is reordering or requiring us to rethink the way we conceptualize, but also increasingly practice diplomacy of reform and transformation. And to a large extent, I think what becomes critical for any grouping, including the MIKTA, is the bigger debate or the bigger questions around lives versus livelihoods, the economic questions. And I think very often when we think of the when we think of lives versus livelihoods, we take a very reductionist approach. It's always about how do we save lives in terms of in my opinion, applying and implementing Agenda 2030, which is very close in terms of its implementation. But then we think about the economy, and we kind of see that as separate entities. We don't see the kind of continuous thread that these two spaces have. Then, of course, we underline that with a very disconnected discussion about security, and look at security in a very kind of traditional sense of war, conflict, etc. There's also conflict in the economy, conflict about tension around inequality, poverty, dislocation, marginalization, lack of access to resources, and so forth. And I think this is an ideal opportunity as well for this debate to be spearheaded by MIKTA in terms of this idea of the multilateral system, and more importantly, how this idea of lives versus livelihoods is it's not just a kind of pedantic debate. It is a debate about the fact that if we don't have the human spirit, if we don't have the idea of saving people's livelihoods and lives, we just won't have an economy. We just won't have a world. We just won't have a state. And it's useless talking about these different types of entities in a kind of independent context of debate and diplomacy. Then my last 2 points, I think, are interrelated around the role that MIKTA plays as a bridge maker between their traditional spaces, but also in terms of the non-traditional and traditional partners, and putting onto the agenda of the G20 and so forth, the kinds of issues that will actually move the debate forward. Personally, I think that COVID has offered us an opportunity to revisit the middle power debates, the role that middle powers will play in the transformation of the global governance agenda and the reform of the power imbalance in the global governance agenda. I think the big power syndrome, or the competitive rivalry that we see in terms of the geostrategic issues about big powers, is now beginning to kind of unearth itself in different ways. So definitely the idea of bridge making and using platforms like the G20, like the G7, as well as within the UN. And for me, one of the big questions is what's going on in the WTO around the TRIPS waiver issue with regard to access to the vaccine, but also manufacturing, and what does this mean going forward? I think here is where we're going to return to the middle power debates and the role that middle powers are going to play. And then my final point would really be around the strength that MIKTA represents. I know there's been certain questions being raised about what is your key core focus or purpose as a grouping. I think right now many groupings are going through a similar kind of redefining its identity, its positioning in the world. So to me, I think that even the BRICS is going through that. Yes, outside of the new development bank, what else is the BRICS doing? And we'll basically look to what India proposes and of course what China does when it takes over the presidency of the BRICS. But you can see that the MIKTA can take a different stance on issues with regard to what they put out as their global purpose and positioning. And this identity is something that would be quite important in terms of a COVID reorientation of diplomacy and global governance. So I'll stop here. I don't want to basically take up too much of time, but I think these are some of the broader contextual structural questions and issues that I would like to see some of the presenters respond to, and others. Thank you.
Thank you, Sanusha, for setting the scene. Many interesting points, especially with regards to multilateralism. Yes, I agree. This MIKTA grouping of middle powers. Also, it's a diverse grouping. You're looking from the Americas to Eurasia. You're looking to ASEAN, Indian Ocean. You're looking at the Far East and Oceania with Australia. And yes, many questions, especially with regards to the pandemic and what truth it has thrust to the fore. Politics versus economics. Does political change necessarily equate to economic change? And these are some of the questions that the world in general will have to look at answering. And with that, I'd like to introduce High Commissioner Gita Kamath, High Commissioner of Australia to South Africa, and obviously with representation around the SADC region. Let me just briefly read out Gita's bio, High Commissioner's bio. High Commissioner is registered at the Supreme Court in New South Wales as a legal practitioner. So she has a very extensive legal background, which is always helpful in these cases in diplomacy and international trade. She served as Deputy Head of Mission in Paris, Ambassador to UNESCO, a non-resident ambassador to Chad in the Central African Republic, early posting in Singapore, in Canberra, which is the capital of Australia. I just want to say that. She has served as Assistant Secretary of the Africa branch, Agriculture and Food branch, and Domestic Legal branch as a Director. And the Arms Control section as well. She holds a Bachelor of Arts. She holds a Bachelor of Arts and a Bachelor of Law degrees from the University of New South Wales, and a graduate diploma in legal practice from the University of Technology, Sydney, and a Masters of Arts, Foreign Affairs and Trade from Australian National University. And as I explained, she's admitted to the Supreme Court of the New South Wales as a legal practitioner. Excellency, let's hear how Australia looks at this MIKTA grouping, and with regards to the theme that we've been running through. Thank you, Excellency. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Kirtan. I firstly wanted to just thank the Diplomatic Society for initiating and hosting this webinar today. It gives us a great opportunity to raise the profile of MIKTA here in Pretoria and more broadly in South Africa. And thank you for the greetings in an Indigenous language. I don't know which language it is, but Australia has more than 200 Indigenous languages. And as you have opened this with an Indigenous language, I feel compelled to do a little bit of what we call an acknowledgement of country, which if we were in Australia, I would be acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which Australia was founded, the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, and paying my respects to their leaders, past, present, and emerging. And just thank you, Sanusha, for the opening remarks and, some really good questions that you asked. I think the divergence in MIKTA, and it's true, we are a cross-regional grouping. I'd say that unlike the BRICS, we're not a formal organisation. It's an informal grouping that came about in 2013. And rather than using the word divergent, I'd use the word diverse. I think that it's our cross-regional composition and our diversity which is our strength. And yes, we're all G20 members. Where Sanusha, you use the word middle powers. I'd say yes, we're all middle powers. We all have similar sized GDPs. And Sanusha, you asked the question, what is our core focus or purpose? I'd like to think that our common interest as MIKTA members, for the 5 of us, is to support effective global governance. And I think it's our diversity and our cross-regional composition which allows us to share our different perspectives, our knowledge from our own regions and our own experiences. And that's what can help to build consensus, recognise where we have differences, and also magnify our influence. It's true that the last 12 months has been a real incredible period of uncertainty and disruption. And what I think that has thrown up is the role of multilateral institutions. Institutions such as the World Health Organization, particularly when it comes to COVID, the World Trade Organization when it comes to open markets and open economies and economic recovery. These institutions, I think it's fair to say, are under strain, yet they remain critical to promoting global solutions to the challenges we face. And what MIKTA can do is play an important role in helping to support these institutions and to promote and protect what we in Australia like to call a rules-based international order. And we can do this by advocating through these existing international fora for open economies and for strengthened global governance. We can do this by supporting the rules that protect and preserve peace and curb the excessive use of power and enable international trade investment. And we can do this by promoting the norms that underpin universal human rights, gender equality, and the rule of law. I'd like to commend the Republic of Korea for being chair of MIKTA in what was a very difficult and a year of unprecedented challenge. We're very proud to chair MIKTA this year, and we're really committed. Kirtan, you asked about the longevity of MIKTA. Well, we're very committed to maintain MIKTA's momentum this year. Our objective is to promote and support MIKTA as a forum, to foster dialogue, share learnings, and issue joint statements. And our work is focused on 3 areas, and I will just go through each of those topics briefly: COVID, gender equality, and climate action. So I think on COVID, it's fair to say that it's really shown us the value of greater cooperation on these global challenges, strengthening pandemic preparedness, strengthening the global health architecture. These are crucial elements to prepare and respond to the current global health crisis and future health crises. Australia, along with all MIKTA countries, endorsed a World Health Assembly resolution last year, which called for an independent inquiry into the origins of COVID. This was a resolution that was supported by a record 146 co-sponsors, including South Africa, and it sent a really strong message of multilateral solidarity. The origin inquiries and its ongoing work are vital to learn how the pandemic started and spread so that we can learn lessons and prevent an outbreak such as this from occurring again. Australia's priorities for reform in this area are to build an independent and authoritative World Health Organization, reduce the risk of zoonotic disease transmission, and strengthen the WHO's operations on the ground. So we're really looking forward to the recommendations from the independent review processes on how to address deficiencies in the global health architecture. And we see MIKTA as a forum for higher level exchange on how we can support this global agenda and ensure that the WHO remains fit for purpose. A second key priority in 2021 as it regards COVID is, of course, the rollout of COVID-19 vaccines around the world. So ensuring equitable access to vaccines is going to be central to global recovery from the pandemic. For our part, Australia is supporting the delivery of vaccines through the COVAX's facility known as the Advanced Market Commitment for Developing Countries. We've provided 80 million Australian dollars to this facility. And once again, through MIKTA, we can share expertise and strategies on vaccine approaches at home and in our respective regions, including on issues such as international recognition and certification of vaccines. Turning to gender equality, a subject close to my heart, this is going to be a continued focus for us during our term as MIKTA chair. It's very timely. We've just had International Women's Day to consider how COVID has exacerbated existing human rights concerns, including gender inequality, and has had a significant impact on women and girls. Australia welcomed the focus on this issue provided by the virtual dialogue on women and COVID-19 that was hosted by ministers from Turkey and the Republic of Korea in October last year, and we aim to build on this momentum. What we propose to do is to host this year a virtual Foreign and Women's Affairs Ministers meeting and issue a joint MIKTA statement on the role of women in building a post-COVID-19 world together. This meeting will be an opportunity to continue to share progress on our recovery efforts and strategies for boosting women's economic security, reducing violence against women, and narrowing the gender gap. And once again, we want to focus on addressing some of the pre-existing barriers to women's participation in the economy and the role of women in decision-making, both during the crisis, but also in the post-COVID recovery phase. And it's important that we have an opportunity to share and exchange views on our respective approaches, our policies, our practices to addressing and promoting gender equality in our responses to the pandemic. And finally, on climate action. Australia has taken a very practical approach to climate change, and I think we have demonstrated a good record of achievement. Over the last 15 years, we've reduced our emissions by around 19%. And if you look at it on a per capita basis, that amounts to over 36% since 2005. Almost 1 in 4 Australians homes now has solar on their rooftops. And I think that's probably the highest uptake in the world. And we expect that renewables will contribute at least 50% of our electricity by 2030 in Australia. But to drive pathways to net zero global emissions, we need to focus on the how. And to this end, Australia is building and investing in renewables at record levels. I've just mentioned solar, for instance. And we're focused on accelerating the development of low emissions technologies and getting the cost of deploying them to parity with existing higher emission alternatives. We're very keen to advance targeted practical collaboration on climate change, including on practical, scalable and commercially viable technologies which will allow us to deliver on our commitments. A very important part of this is our national hydrogen strategy, where we're trying to build a green hydrogen industry in Australia, including for export. And we're also focused on strengthening global adaptation and resilience efforts, including through major meetings such as the Asia Pacific Ministerial Conference on Disaster Risk Reduction, which Australia is going to host next year. And that's why over 70% of Australia's 1.5 billion in climate finance over the next 5 years is going to support adaptation and resilience in our region. And when it comes to MIKTA and climate action, I think there's real value in MIKTA countries enhancing our collaboration in this space. We bring diverse, I wouldn't necessarily say divergent, Anusha, diverse perspectives from different regions, and we span diverse negotiating groups in multilateral climate processes. And I think there's real value in exchanging ideas on the economic challenges and opportunities, given that we have many similarities, differences, and complementarities in our economic structures. I think I'll leave it for there for the moment. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Excellency. Australia certainly a key player in global issues, and good to hear that commitment to climate, to gender issues, as well as with regards to the COVID-19 pandemic. The need for solidarity, in humanity, and also the impact of COVID-19. I know there has been certain studies about reduction in pollution due to industries slowing down or closing down, what have you. But there has been the other side of where your medical supplies, your masks, your PPEs, which are now filling landfills as well. So there is some sort of balance that needs to come from this COVID-19 pandemic. I recently reviewed a book called Pandemia's Box, which has many ideas, many innovative ideas on going forward, including on human diplomacy. The book was written by Dieter Brockmeyer of the Diplomatic World Institute, which we have a partnership with. And these are some of the issues, new issues that are going to be facing humanity, and not just humanity. I think also with COVID, there has been an acknowledgement that the plants, animals, we all share this planet, and humanity especially will have to look at its consumption model, its supply model. Value chains have changed. Economics, some of the economic factors have totally gone off a tangent, and these are some of the things that we have to look at as well. So thank you, Excellency, for your inputs on Australia. I'm sure Shanusha will respond to you, and Ajay will have something to have some input with regards to that. With that, I would like to introduce Ambassador Park Chul-Ju. I hope I say that correctly, Excellency. Welcome to South Africa. I know the protocol word is designate ambassador to South Africa, but welcome to South Africa. I know former Ambassador Park was quite active in South Africa, and we hope that your posting will be just as exciting and active, although the new situation presents new challenges and new opportunities, new ideas, new space for innovation, and this is where we we could progress and then look at how we can collaborate. Just a brief, background bio on Ambassador Park. He has a BA in English from the National University of Seoul, MA in Foreign Affairs from Virginia in the USA, and joined and has been in foreign ministry since 1991, and has a long, illustrious career in foreign relations. As Consul General in Shanghai, First Secretary in the People's Republic of China, First Secretary in Finland, and also at home in Korea, planning, management, policy, human resources policy division, and was counselor at the United Nations Permanent Office. He's also served at the Netherlands in Europe, and Director General for Legal Affairs in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. I see this legal representation, legal, what shall I say, fraternity within the diplomatic corps, coming through quite strong. I think that's good in terms of negotiations and looking at international relations in that regard. Ambassador Park is married with 3 daughters, so I'm sure, like myself, who has daughters, very interested and very supportive of gender and gender issues. Ambassador Park, I open the floor to you and look forward to your inputs. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. I thank you so much, Mr. Kirtan Bana, the managing editor of the Diplomatic Society. I hope you have no problem in seeing and hearing me very clearly. Yeah.
We hear you. We see you very clearly, Excellency. Please continue.
Thank you so much. As you mentioned, I just arrived in South Africa as a new ambassador from Republic of Korea to South Africa in last December, and then I really, in a process of loving this country and the people and weather, everything in South Africa. So, it's so nice experience up to now. Having said that, I would like to begin by thanking the Diplomatic Society to make today's webinar happen. I'm very pleased to be able to make my presentation today to you with ambassadors of other MIKTA countries, which is the group of middle powers who cherish the multilateralism, and we want want to play a kind of bridging role surrounding very important priority issues in our times. I think there are 2 key challenges that we need to address in our times. The first is putting a stop to the spread of COVID-19, and the other is overcoming the climate crisis. While effectively, the fighting against the COVID-19 pandemic, the Republic of Korea is also very keen on fulfilling our promises to climate action, which is highlighted by the recent introduction of Korean Green New Deal initiative and 2050 carbon neutrality goals, as well as the hosting of the P4G Seoul Summit in May this year. That's why I opt for climate action as a theme of my presentation today, out of 3 priorities of MIKTAs for this year. First of all, I would like to take a few minutes to draw your attention to why Korea decided to join the P4G initiative and what Korea plans to achieve through the 2021 P4G Seoul Summit. Literally, P4G stands for the Partnering for Green Growth and Global Goals 2030. It is a new global initiative commenced in 2017 with the ambition of developing concrete public and private partnership at scale to deliver on the Sustainable Development Goals and the Paris Climate Agreement. For decades, the UN system and governments have tried to save this planet from climate change. We have made progress. However, at the same time, we also have to recognize that the current level of efforts are not enough. We need to engage with the private sector and civil society. We have to make sure that our citizens and companies are on board in our action against climate change. This is where P4G fits into the picture. P4G is an action-oriented initiative led by 12 member countries, including South Africa, where we are residing, and 3 other MIKTA partners, namely Indonesia, Mexico, and my republic. Resonating the success of the inaugural P4G summit in Denmark in 2018, the Republic of Korea will host the second P4G summit in Seoul on May 30 and 31 this year. In case of its format, we have tried to host the summit in person, but the unprecedented COVID-19 crisis doesn't allow us to make it happen. So in this context, the second P4G Seoul Summit will be held in virtual format. With regard of its theme, the summit will become an impetus to further strengthen the climate action toward 2050 carbon neutrality. This is why the inclusive green recovery toward carbon neutrality is selected as the provisional theme of the summit. The issue to be covered mainly at the summit, such as green recovery, carbon neutrality, and the urgency of international collaboration, will be embodied in the so-called the Seoul Declaration, which will be the outcome document of the summit. Needless to say, the year 2021, this year, is an important year for our planet, I think. It is the first year in which we begin to implement the Paris Agreement. Furthermore, this year has 4 important climate-related summits at least, which is already started with the Climate Adaptation Summit in January, hosted by the Netherlands. And secondly, the World Climate Summit, which will be hosted by the US in April. And third one is, of course, the P4G Seoul Summit in May that I'm introducing to you right now. And finally, the COP26 to be held in Glasgow, UK in November. In this regard, Korea believes that the P4G Seoul Summit is very timely and will serve as a stepping stone for the successful organization of the COP26 in content. Now I turn to Korea's effort to fulfill our promises to climate action. First of all, we submitted last December our updated nationally determined contribution, which increased the level of ambition. Korea plans to reduce its greenhouse gas emission by 24.4% from 2017 level by 2030 across all economic sectors. Furthermore, Korea's vision for a low carbon future was highlighted in the recently introduced Korean Green New Deal Initiative and 2050 carbon neutrality goals. It shows that Korea is committed to implementing the Paris Agreement faithfully, and we pursue a sustainable society. In case of the Green New Deal Initiative, it is a stimulus package investing $62 billion in the next 5 years. And 3 main focus areas of the initiative are low carbon and decentralized energy, and the innovation in the green industry, and lastly, green transition of our infrastructure in Korea. Our key 5 project of the initiative is green energy, smart and green industrial complexes, eco-friendly mobility of the future, and green remodeling, finally, green and smart schools. In case of green energy, as far as green energy is concerned, the Korean government has been pushing ahead with the expansion of clean energy while reducing the dependency on coal power plants. The Renewable Energy 3020 Plan, announced in late 2017, sets a goal of increasing share of renewable in electricity generation up to 20% by 2030. In particular, my government has already closed the 4 existing coal power plants, and we will shut down 30 more such plants by 2030. 24 of which will be replaced by the LNG power plants. The construction of new coal power plants is now completely banned in my republic. Having said that, our aim to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050 will not be easy to implement, but we will join with other global others in transforming our economy into a low carbon one. Well, before closing, I would like to quote what President Cyril Ramaphosa mentioned about climate action in his recent Davos agenda speech in January. And I quote, "Beyond COVID-19, there is perhaps no areas of human endeavor that requires common global action more than our response to climate change. It is essential that we each honor our commitment under the Paris Agreement to combat climate change, with the specific focus on means of implementation support and adaptation efforts. This is a key area for Africa, as our continent is disproportionately affected by climate change, despite releasing the lowest carbon emission." End of quote. Indeed, he established Presidential Coordinating Commission on Climate Change in order to implement what he mentioned in the speech. The Commission is now working on a plan for a just transition to a new low-carbon economy and climate-resilient society for South Africa. Its largest greenhouse gas emitter, Eskom, has further committed in principle to net zero emission by 2050 and to increase its renewable capacity. In this regard, I hope South Africa will join us at the 2021 P4G Seoul Summit at the highest level. South African experience and wisdom will surely be of great value in ensuring the success of the summit. Well, I thank you so much for your attention, and I will join again in a Q&A session. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Park, for your inputs on Korea. Korea, used to be a least developed country, and it's probably the only country that has come out as a fully developed country, and probably the 10th, 11th, rated economy in the world. With high-tech solutions, as Excellency explained, on climate management, energy management issues, renewable energy, and so forth. Thank you very much for your inputs, Excellency. I'm going to move right on to Ambassador Ana Luisa Fajel Flores of Mexico. Excellency, thank you so much for joining us. It's always good to hear what's happening in the Americas from a perspective of Mexico. Also key player in the region, as well as in the world, with a long and ancient history, and indigenous knowledge that we should look back at, as well as we look to innovate new societies. Ambassador Fajel joined the Mexican Foreign Service in 1993 and has a degree in international relations from the National Autonomous University of Mexico, a master's degree in African Studies from El Colegio de Mexico. In the Secretariat of Foreign Relations, she served as Director General for Africa and Middle East, and as Director for North America. She served as Deputy Chief of Mission at the Embassy of Mexico to the United States and Consul in Minnesota. She has a long career in international relations, and currently she is Ambassador of Mexico to South Africa, concurrent before 11 countries in Southern Africa. Ambassador Fajel, please take it away from me. I look forward to your inputs.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Kirtan, for putting this very interesting discussion together and giving visibility to MIKTA as a constructive group of countries. Thank you, Sanusha, for your thoughtful and provocative reflections. It will be very interesting to have this discussion around the concepts you mentioned in your remarks. And well, I'm thrilled to share this virtual discussion with my dear colleagues and friends, MIKTA ambassadors in South Africa. Let me, if I may, just to make a few comments regarding what has been said here about MIKTA, because MIKTA is a Mexican initiative, actually, in 2013. And I was close to the Minister of Foreign Affairs at that time, and I remember some of the discussions that happened at that moment regarding why is it important to have this group. And you have mentioned some of the aspects. Gita has mentioned some of the aspects. In particular, our relevance lies on the like-minded countries that we are, and also the informal structure that this group means, and its positive contribution to multilateralism. Definitely, we are diverse countries, but that's also our richness. If you look at the cultural and historic backgrounds of all the 5 countries, it's amazing. The 5 are so rich, immensely rich. So this brings us together as well, and contributing to global governance as well. I think MIKTA has done a lot of progress. It has increased its visibility. It has increased the dialogue in the different fora. And now many other groups are paying attention to MIKTA because it's growing visibility and its empathy with the situation, particularly with COVID-19, and its role supporting multilateral institutions. So regarding Mexico, what is Mexico's approach to the priorities outlined by Australia for its chairship? In regards to COVID-19 response and recovery, we have adopted specific actions, such as the promotion of Resolution 74/274, to ensure global access to vaccines, to medical equipment and medicines. I think this is a key point. We believe that vaccines should be considered public health goods, particularly because it is a global crisis with repercussions for all humanity. Therefore, Mexico will continue to strengthen the World Health Organization and all protocols and regulations in the field of international public health. In regards to gender equality, consistent with our feminist foreign policy, which was launched by the foreign minister, our Minister of Foreign Affairs in January 2020, and actually, this is the first instrument of its kind in the Global South. Mexico reaffirms its commitment with gender equality, human rights for women and girls, and the eradication of all forms of discrimination and gender-based violence. One of the main contributions of our feminist foreign policy is precisely the incorporation of intersectionality. By this, I mean the consideration of other vulnerabilities, besides the ones that we know. Now Mexico has incorporated concepts such as, or categories such as race, religion, sexual preference, and ethnicity. So that means a huge contribution to all the feminist movements and the different feminist foreign policies. So we are the first in Latin America. It is a fact that COVID-19 has highlighted structural inequalities and differentiated impacts on the lives of women and girls, which is why it is indispensable to put them at the center of the response. Kirtan, you referred to human beings, to the importance of the persons, and this crisis has put the interest of the people in the center of our response. In this context, it is relevant to note that Mexico is co-chairing the Gender Equality Forum together with France under the initiative of UN Women. The Gender Equality Forum is a civil society-centered, multi-stakeholder global gathering. South Africa actually is playing a very important role as a leader of action coalitions focusing on economic justice, climate justice, gender violence, technology and innovation, bodily autonomy and reproductive rights, and feminist movements and leadership. I think that this is really very important. This is going to take place in Mexico from the 29th of March to the 31st of March. And then in June, the forum will take place in Paris. We recently had a webinar promoting all the countries and diplomats and obviously civil society to join the forum. And the importance is precisely because it is concentrated on civil society. The second topic that I want to refer to is climate action. For Mexico, it is a priority to achieve the mainstreaming of a gender perspective, a human rights approach, and the defense of indigenous peoples in international climate action. We don't want anybody to be left behind, and that is why the incorporation of indigenous people, all these vulnerable sectors of the population, is so important. As a co-leader along with Canada of the Global Adaptation Commission Working Group on Nature-Based Solutions, Mexico will continue to promote the importance of adaptation and the need to devote the same efforts and resources to this as to mitigation. We are also committed with a post-COVID green recovery as part of transitioning strategy towards a low-carbon economy that is fair for the workforce. And also, as my colleague, Dr. Park, Ambassador Park said, we are part of the P4G group as well. Finally, allow me to share with you some areas of collaboration that have proven to be important and upon which we should continue to focus in MIKTA. First, strengthening the multilateral health architecture. That was mentioned by Gita as well. With vaccination programs beginning to roll out in the world, the main challenge this year is ensuring their equitable distribution. This is, of course, crucial to avoid the widening of social inequalities. MIKTA must continue to support existing multilateral initiatives such as COVAX, for example. This is part of the World Health Organization, of course. The second is regarding pandemic preparedness and prevention. We should continue to advocate for the implementation of the One Health approach, where human, animal, and environmental considerations are taken together to prevent the emergence of new diseases. And you touch on this topic as well briefly, Kirtan. This approach has been identified as a cross-cutting priority in many multilateral agendas, including the UN and the G20. The task is to explore concrete proposals in areas including biodiversity protection, wildlife trafficking, climate and health and environmental governance. Third, what happens with gender equality? There are many spaces where we can work together. For example, Mexico is co-chairing with Ireland the Security Council's Committee on Women, Peace and Security. This is a promising space to drive this agenda forward. And fourth and last, promoting a sustainable and inclusive recovery. This is key. We can deepen our efforts to promote trade and investment, cultural exchanges, and tourism flows between our countries. And also, we can take advantage of the synergies that are happening among our international cooperation agencies of our 5 countries to promote, to motivate research and innovation, both, for example, in physical and mental health. This is going to be a huge challenge as well, and we should be focusing more on these kind of challenges. Thank you very much.
Thank you for inputs, very informed with regards to gender, climate, as per the theme. Diversity, yes, that is something that Diplomatic Society, the publication, was founded on in 1997. And we have, for me personally, you know, and for the people that have been involved in my team at the Diplomatic Society, it has been a profound and enriching experience just to be able to interact with people from Turkey or Indonesia or wherever it was. And we've learned a great deal about different cultures, you know, food, music, and we've sort of, our lives have improved because of the international representation in our country. And because of you, the diplomats, in the beginning days, South Africans didn't know each other either. And it was diplomats that went out to, out far-flung places that took us with them to say, this is this community out in Mamelodi or Hammanskraal, and this is what we are doing. And we as South Africans got to know each other because of the diplomatic community. And this is what the diplomatic society is about the diversity, about we are going to be launching a series on human diplomacy as well. With our partners out in Europe as well, and just to see this connection that people have, and how we don't always have to agree, but there is a way to discuss things and put things forward. So I just want to say thank you, Excellency. Women's rights are human rights, and taking it from there, I'd like to bring on Ambassador Elif Komunglu'n Ulgen. Merhaba, Excellency. Always good to see you. Always good to interact with you. Welcome to this discussion. Ambassador Ulgen is a career diplomat, joined the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in 1993 after graduating from the Faculty of Political Science at the University of Accra. She received a master's degree in political science and international relations from the University of Bosphorus, Istanbul, and she arrived in Pretoria to take up a new post in February 26, 2017. She also has a long, illustrious career in diplomacy. It's great to have all this experience here with us today in terms of international relations and negotiations, and I'm sure we're going to move the debate forward in the themes that we are discussing. Our discussions today, we will have these up on YouTube, and we will be putting together, and we'll be following up with regards to discussions we have. And hopefully, a few months down the line, maybe we could regroup and see where we've gone to from there. So with that, Excellency Ulgen, the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, dear Diplomatic Society, and of course, my very dear MIKTA colleagues. And I can't be very objective when it comes to the MIKTA colleagues, particularly because MIKTA is really an organization we feel very close, a formation we feel very close to our hearts, but particularly in South Africa, we had been lucky to be surrounded with very warm, very good, and I think very colleagues that we do understand and get along very well with. So I'm very happy and very grateful to you, particularly to also bring us around this webinar. It's a good opportunity. And as Diplomatic Society, of course, you deserve a big applaud for really not even stopping a little minute during all these very difficult times where everything has changed, unfortunately, in terms of our very close contacts. Thank you very much. I was, of course, I mean, being one of the last speakers, I cannot agree more with what have been said with with the previous speakers. More or less, they really very much overlap with my speaking notes. Before, whilst preparing for this webinar, I had also asked some input from my authorities, and I'm very happy to see that all my colleagues probably have more or less the same notes. It also shows the strength, or maybe the harmony, that is really increasingly getting its place into this wonderful group of MIKTA. But I must also compliment the dear Sanusha Naidu. She really set the scene, and I decided to move a little bit away from my notes, which most of the points were already taken. But I think the scene that she said and the questions she had asked were very triggering. And though believing that most of my colleagues had already provided some answers, I am happy maybe to kindly touch upon one of the very difficult questions she put, and that was her curiosity. And if I may, I would also like to congratulate her for doing this in a very short span of time. She said the 24 hours, she really studied hardly and put forth some very hard questions. One of them was how MIKTA countries would be approaching the ongoing debate within the WTO with the TRIPS agreement negotiations. And very strangely, our commercial counselor just yesterday had forwarded me a draft, not a draft, but this is just like a council paper from WTO, and it's titled Enhancing the Role of the World Trade Organization in the Global Effort Towards the Production and Distribution of COVID-19 Vaccines and Other Medical Products. And this is a paper produced by the countries of Australia, Canada, Chile, Colombia, New Zealand, Norway, and Turkey. Immediately when I looked at the names, I really searched for the other MIKTA countries, Mexico, Indonesia, and Korea. I am not aware what their position is within WTO, but I do believe that there will be some sympathy within MIKTA, because more or less the paper puts forth how basically Australia and Turkey, but I do believe in general, because the paper also overlaps with the discussions within MIKTA of how we want this COVAX exercise to look for the equal distribution and the rightful distribution of the vaccine strategy. And I was very happy that Australia and Turkey were already amongst the sponsors of such a paper. So having said that, and being able to partly answer the very challenging question by Sanusha, let me go back to what I was actually planning to say today. And of course, I would also like to start my words by complimenting the very successful Korean chairmanship of MIKTA all through 2020. It was really a year where all of us were caught unprepared. It was a shocking year, and we are grateful that the Korean chairmanship was still able to craft a very good term of 12 months full of MIKTA work, which had really yielded very good results, and we do believe this will also pave future work of MIKTA. And now, of course, Australia is now at the helm and taken the flag from Korea, and we very much support the Australian priorities for the upcoming months. And indeed, back in Ankara, I know at our relevant departments, there is a good amount of preparation to play the necessary role and to fulfill the expectations of each one of us from the MIKTA, as the MIKTA countries, but also to contribute to multilateralism, to the need that is maybe most urgent these days, that the international community agrees around the principles which will protect humanity, which will, of course, observe the rights of particularly women and children and the most needy in the face of such an inhumane crisis. Looking back to these 7 years that we had worked together in this formation, again, I cannot agree more what my colleagues have said, but also what Sanusha, she put forth as an observer to the group. Yes, it was basically the durability, the sustainability, the divergence, and the diverseness of the members of MIKTA, which made MIKTA more and more visible in the international stage. Yes, MIKTA is also a role of a bridge maker, and MIKTA, all MIKTA countries, as our colleagues have already said, are also G20 countries. So we do share the same ideals and the same principles of all G20 countries, and we are aware of our responsibilities of being a member of a giant group like G20. And in that sense, of course, we also share the ideals and the principles together with the other G20 country, which is currently our host country, South Africa. But within the G20, I think all these 5 MIKTA countries coming from very different geographical formations and paths, with different historical backgrounds, but with similar number of populations and with similar economic background, we have been able to craft priorities, policies, approaches that are workable and viable for all of us. And I think I see also the difference between BRICS and MIKTA on that alikeness of its members. Of course, BRICS is also a formation of giants continental giants, but you could also see lots of disparities between BRICS members. These disparities are less visible and indeed, from some extent, when you look at those MIKTA countries, they are invisible. And maybe this is also bringing us more around the ideals that we want to build. And of course, the flexibility that it offers to governments in these difficult days. Turkey in its region is facing lots of challenges and is fighting against those challenges. Australia faces other challenges. Mexico has totally, different challenges that sometimes in our part we cannot understand. But really, we are able to come together because this flexible modus vivendi that MIKTA has put forth enables us to work at every level. And indeed, my authorities were also very happy and to for the first time in our 7 years history, I think it was during last year's UN General Assembly, that the leaders of MIKTA countries first time had released a statement together. And that was also something, I think, after 7 years of working together was something that we needed and we appreciate very much. Despite, of course, all the negative impacts of the pandemic, we had also had many significant meetings as the international community, but of course, as MIKTA countries, and that we found very inspiring all through 2020. Let me, with your permission, mention the others that I had already said. One of them, which is the UN, the statement, the joint MIKTA statement that was released after the UN 75th anniversary meetings. We could devise concrete deliverables for a meeting at the leaders level that we had seen, and that has satisfied our expectations. We place particular emphasis on MIKTA's focus, of course, on women-related issues, on gender-related issues, and we look forward for the upcoming meetings and gatherings that will be organized under the Australian presidency on women and gender-related issues. And as the pandemic worsened, the existing inequalities posing an additional burden for women, we think that it is a must to integrate the perspective into COVID-19 concrete responses. We also welcome the collaboration among the development cooperation agencies, and this has also started at working level meetings between our countries. The dual meetings of the senior officials of both foreign affairs and health ministries, that also provides a wonderful opportunity for MIKTA countries to look at the common challenges of COVID-19 from both foreign policy priority side and also from health policy. And that was also a great initiative, we thought. Last but not least, we appreciate the wider collaboration among our diplomatic missions all around the globe. And again, I would like to compliment my colleagues in South Africa. I think we are exemplary MIKTA colleagues here in this part of the world. And once again, thank you, Diplomatic Society, for giving us this opportunity to share it with you. As I said, we totally agree with the Australian presidency priorities, and we are dedicated to work for the successful achievement of these priorities. We are confident that the MIKTA model is also becoming inspiring on other partners, other countries, in our own nations. As I said, it started with the foreign ministries, but now we are happily seeing that in our bureaucracies and in our civil community, civil society, in the greater structures of our countries, we see the MIKTA collaboration at many levels, and this also shows that this was a successful model. I don't want to take longer time. As I said, we are approaching towards the end of the webinar. I would like to also leave time for the other participants, and also if we have an opportunity of Q&As. Thank you once again for the patience, and I look forward for a better cooperation between MIKTA countries and the other G20 member, South Africa. Thank you.
Thank you, Excellency. Great input. MIKTA, it sounds so so nice on the tongue. It's got such a good sound to it. It could be gender neutral, MIKTA. And I wish you. I wish you success in that regard. Thank you, Excellency, also for addressing the TRIPS issue. It's an issue of our time, in terms of multilateral conglomerates, lobby groups. What are the interests that are there? And I'm sure Sanusha will address that issue when she gets a chance to respond. So thank you. Just moving on because of time. Apa kabar, Excellency Al-Farisi? Always good to chat with you. As you see, my batik shirt support for Indonesia. Great country, lots of diversity. Just a brief background on Ambassador Al-Farisi. Like I said, also a long, illustrious career in foreign relations. Always good to have this kind of wealth of knowledge and expertise around the table to discuss. And maybe we should look at some other issues at a later stage as well. Maybe ambassadors, Excellency, you could come up with some suggestions if you want to do something in that regard. Ambassador Al-Farisi, Salman Al-Farisi, is currently ambassador in South Africa as well as Eswatini, Botswana, Lesotho. He was senior advisor to the Minister of Foreign Affairs. He was acting Director General at Multilateral Affairs. He's also served as Deputy Head of Mission in Washington, D.C., as Ambassador to the UAE, Deputy Director at ECOSOC in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Head of Asia Pacific, and Sub-Director of Double Taxation Avoidance. I think that's a very key post, Excellency. We need to talk about the double taxation. He's Head of Section of the Asia Sub-Director. Sorry, I said that. And he was started off third secretary as Embassy of Indonesia in Bangkok. Excellency has a doctoral policy studies at the Gajah Mada University in Indonesia, master's degrees in international relations, bachelor's degree in economic and development studies. Excellency, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Kirtan, for the introduction. Excellencies, Ambassador and High Commissioner, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. Indeed, I'm delightful today for being part of this webinar. Let me express our sincere appreciation to the Diplomatic Society for initiating and hosting this event. Yes, MIKTA is not the big power club indeed, but all MIKTA countries, I believe, have a very strong commitment to this to significantly contribute to fine-tune global agenda, in particular on the global governance, as mentioned by Gita earlier. Thank you, Sanusa, for the remarks. I agree with you that MIKTA is diverse, but I would also agree with Gita that the diversity is our strength. It's also part of our culture in Indonesia. With the ever-changing and dynamic global landscape, our informal approach allows flexibility and no restriction to discussing various regional and global issues. And indeed, we can play our bridging role, as I can say, in finding solution of the global problems. And with our economic strength, MIKTA can focus itself on promoting functional cooperation in order to strengthen its visibility as the middle power. Indonesia welcomes Australia as MIKTA new chairman and appreciates South Korea for the successful chairmanship last year. We support the chairmanship of Australia, and it is this year with three priority agenda, namely COVID response and recovery, gender equality, and climate change. That's indeed a very important agenda, and then thank you, Australia, for putting this very dear global issue. On COVID-19, as COVID-19 has changed the way we live, but one thing that still among our commitment and MIKTA is that the multilateralism. We support the multilateralism. Indonesia believes that to curb the spread and mitigate the impact of COVID-19, we cannot work alone. The pandemic requires worldwide solidarity and urgent global effort, in particular in ensuring easy and affordable access to vaccine for all. I think almost all the speaker has mentioned about this issue. Action-oriented global cooperation is the best option to respond to the current pandemic of COVID-19. That's why Indonesia has been proactively participating in numerous multilateral initiatives, among them initiating the UN GA resolution on global solidarity in fighting COVID-19, which was supported by many member countries. Sharing also the foreign policy and global health in 2020, which was fully supported by WHO. And one of the meeting was also attended by Dr. Naledi Pandor virtually. Indonesia is also co-chairing the COVAX Advanced Market Commitment, AMC, engagement group together with Canada and Ethiopia. So the COVAX is now very important institution that I think MIKTA countries will support us in bringing COVAX make a fair treatment to developing countries. On gender equality, for Indonesia, gender equality is indeed our development priorities. Women make up around 39% of Indonesia's workforce in 2019, slightly above the average of 38% among 95 countries surveyed by McKinsey in 2019. According to the World Bank in 2019, also estimated that 41% of women workforce in Indonesia were in the formal salaried job, increased from 28% in 2000. This is indeed a sign that the quality of women's job in Indonesia is improving. During the COVID-19 pandemic, gender issues has been even more important for Indonesian government. The government has taken various efforts to prevent the impact of COVID-19 pandemic to vulnerable groups, especially women and children, including through the provision of specific needs and capacity building in income-generating activities. In moving forward, Indonesia will continue to ensure a gender-responsive approach as an important part of our policy. And for the third priority of the Australia's agenda is on climate change. With the great value of Indonesia's diversity, without doubt, climate change has become serious development agenda. Indonesia believes that climate change is an essential development issue. The impact of human and natural systems poses serious challenges to our objective of development, including reducing poverty and achieving sustainable development. The government of Indonesia therefore underlines the necessity of full and effective implementation of the Paris Agreement and look forward to the completion of the work program, particularly with regard to the guidelines for market and non-market mechanisms under the Paris Agreement. We are also very keen to look at cooperation in the area of carbon market for promising opportunities. I believe there are many companies already invest in the mangrove forest, for instance, recently. Amid the pandemic, Indonesia believes that the world must do its utmost in maintaining effort to address the adverse impact of climate change. In this regard, Indonesia underlines that it is timely for MIKTA under Australia's leadership to have climate change as the priority agenda with a view to strengthen concrete cooperation and collaboration. Let me conclude by saying that the successful MIKTA cooperation this year under Australia's chairmanship, I believe, will contribute substantially to Indonesia's leadership in the G20 in 2022, next year. We will continue to synergize our utmost effort to further advancing global recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic. Other important agendas such as tourism, energy, infrastructure, digital creative, and creative economy will be also part of the agenda when we host the G20 in next year. So, being the last speaker of this webinar, I think I will stop at that point. I think most of the item has been also spoken quite well by the previous speaker. Thank you very much, Ketan.
Terima kasih, Excellency. Thank you very much. Always good to hear your views, especially out of a country that is surrounded by the Pacific Ring of Fire. Many environmental issues for Indonesia. And thank you very much for your inputs with regards to the cooperation between MIKTA. For that, I'd like to hand over to Advocate Ajay Sukla. As I think many of you diplomats, ambassadors know Ambassador Sukla. He's has extensive experience in government in terms of legal, trade, regulatory issues, and has served in an advisory capacity. And currently, he's specializing in economic and legal diplomacy with us at the Diplomatic Society. Advocate Sukla, welcome. And look forward to your response to the MIKTA discussions. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Ketan, and good morning again to one and all. I think the thematic discussion this morning amongst all the invited speakers was the theme is especially in terms of MIKTA, is unity in diversity. We have heard the diversity issues come up quite a lot, and in terms of MIKTA and the focus, it's the unity in diversity, with the core areas being overcoming vaccine nationalism and the efforts of the COVAX and GAVI when it comes to ensuring that the vaccine rollout during this pandemic becomes an opportunity for one and all on this earth to enjoy. The other area is in terms of gender equality. We have heard about gender equality coming to the forefront, and I think this MIKTA grouping will lead a lot in terms of gender equality. An important aspect is the question of implementation in very many of these themes. It's the implementation of very many of these initiatives need to be undertaken, especially at a G20 level later this year in the UK. That should be a theme that the G20 countries should follow. And then later at COP26 also in the UK, one of the focus areas when MIKTA was founded in 2013 was green energy and a just transition. And I think those are the areas that will play a big role in COP26 as well. We must remind all that way back in 2009 in Copenhagen, South Africa also played a steering role to bring about a just transition. in energy matters and in climate change, climate mitigation, and climate resilience. Back in 2013, MIKTA's focus areas, amongst many, the core focus areas were vis-a-vis counterterrorism and security. Where very many countries are affected by this, and we think the MIKTA will play a steering role in this. Even tomorrow, with the summit of the heads of state of the Quad that are meeting virtually tomorrow, I think High Commissioner Kamat's country would play a sterling role in making a contribution to security issues in the Indo-Pacific, as well as the sterling role that Turkey plays in the Mediterranean in terms of counterterrorism and security issues. The other focus area way back in 2013 on the informal founding of MIKTA was the area of trade and development, and that's sustainable development. I'm sure MIKTA will play a steering role therein as well. And the main areas that we've covered is in terms of the pandemic and the rollout of the vaccines. And I think we have seen human solidarity come to the forefront in 2020 on the world stage, and that should permeate itself throughout going forward. And more importantly, I think that we should also ensure that there is sustainable development for all. But finally, the core area when MIKTA was founded was global governance. And I think global governance needs to also play a pivotal role, not only amongst MIKTA, but for MIKTA founding members to ensure global governance covers the entire globe. But more especially, I speak from an African perspective. I think MIKTA members can, going forward, look at global governance in terms of Africa. I think each and every head of mission who's participated today is aware of the Justice Zondo inquiry that's going on in South Africa. And global governance is something that South Africa is affected in terms of governance issues. The African continent is also affected by governance issues. And I think MIKTA members should play a role in ensuring where there is effective governance, implementation, as well as monitoring on the African continent, because that is one of the areas that's lacking. And as it was a core focus area when MIKTA was founded in 2013, I think MIKTA members should play a more sterling role in that regard, as well as being a voice for global governance, either in the G7. We know that South Korea and Australia will be participants in this forthcoming G7 summit in the UK. All MIKTA members will participate in the G20 summit. We also have the G77 grouping at the United Nations that can play a role, and it's something that one should appeal to in terms of implementation of governance going forward on the African continent. I think I'll stop there, and thank you.
Thank you, Advocate Sukla. Thank you for your inputs. Definitely, bringing together the role of MIKTA and importance of the grouping. There is a chat box for questions. I don't know, we are running already quite long. So if there are any questions, please put them in the chat box. We will see if we can address them. But let me hand over to Sanusha for some closing remarks. Bringing the discussion into focus once again. Thank you, Sanusha.
Thank you, Kirtan, and let me thank the ambassadors and the High Commissioner for the very illustrious insights that they presented around my opening remarks and taking me to task on some of them, which I really appreciate, with regard to the question of divergence versus diversity diversity. What I found really exciting about today's discussion was the commonalities, that as much as MIKTA is an informal group, there's so much of common identity around the idea that these 5 countries, as much as they have a historical eclectic identity to each other, they are also very much a historical commonality to the way they see the world. And I think that diversity around how Advocate Suklal put it, a unity in diversity, is quite a key theme. But I found also the Mexican ambassador made a very interesting point, which I've never heard a grouping or a heads of state or senior diplomatic individual mention in a grouping before, and that is we are about empathy. And empathy, I think, is a key driver of the world today. We cannot move around the issues of combating COVID-19, creating an equitable world in terms of a public health structure, putting human diplomacy first if we don't have empathy for the others. The empathy that we see with regard to the disparate nature of people that are not surviving, who will not make the $2 or the $2.5 mark in terms of poverty, the escalating inequality. So I think empathy is something that for me stood out very starkly when I think about MIKTA, and I think about the fact that the overlapping questions that we had in the beginning and the way that the ambassadors and the High Commissioner had responded to it has given us some sense of purpose of what MIKTA is. And I couldn't help but wonder again, and this is a challenge to you, Curtin, going forward, is maybe convene a second discussion, and that is whether MIKTA will remain as it is now, an informal grouping, or will it see itself expanding informally? And if it's going to expand informally, who will be these members that or countries that will be included? And more importantly, I think in terms of the issues, I think the issues in itself are just overwhelming for all countries in the world. They overlap around the purpose of climate change or climate action, COVID-19 and pandemic diplomacy and preparedness, and also including the question of the zoonotic debates that are happening. Because I think that we can't just look at it in the context of human diplomacy. We've got to also raise the debate about what are we doing to our environment, but more importantly, what are we doing to Earth, to the vegetation, to the biodiversity, to the trafficking of animals, and how do we deal with that? Not only as a kind of issue of governance around human security, but the question of environmental security. And that's very key to the kind of world we want and the kind of world that we create. And finally, I think the question of women has been such an overwhelming common theme and thread that became a continuous issue for all of the representatives of the 5 countries, that we just can't ignore the fact that women are play an integral, if not critical, role in the economy, in society, in reproductive health, in political spaces as well. And we have to think about the role of women in terms of this. How do we recognize the impact of COVID-19? Let me give you an example of this when it came to female mortality in South Africa, a study done at the University of Pretoria together with colleagues from other universities. And it was quite fascinating but scary that female mortality, particularly people that maternal mortality with the women that were pregnant, increased by 30%. And that not because of COVID related, but because of other issues that were impacted by the pandemic, whether they had access to go to prenatal and maternal classes and clinics and so forth. So I think here is, as much as we want to think about the pandemic as a direct challenge, we also got to start thinking about the indirect impacts that COVID-19 has on our lives, our livelihoods, our societies, and more broadly, the way we see the world. And I think what I would really like to end on is the idea that this group is as diverse and as profound and as exciting as any other grouping, and it'd be very interesting to see how this goes forward under the various leadership and presidencies in inverted commas, because you are informal, going forward. And more importantly, how do we look at security beyond just the questions of counterterrorism issues, because security is such a big issue and it is so dynamic. Security, as I said, of the environment, but security of just people who are now also becoming climate refugees. So I'll end there.
Thank you so much, Sanusha, for joining us at such short notice. Appreciate it. Ambassador Leaf, thank you for, when I just pitched the idea, immediately responded, and thank you for your response and encouragement in putting this together. Really appreciate it. I think I am going to rush through. Look, there are a few things coming through, but I don't think we have time. I have another thing to do as well. But we will collect the responses. We will put an article or report back with regards to this. And as Sanusha said, we will probably look at doing another discussion like this, not too distant future. My flight for Mars is going to be leaving shortly, so happy being on planet Earth. It's a great place to be. I think everybody's input shows that there is a way to work together. MIKTA is a fantastic grouping, in my opinion. It covers the globe. It spreads from Oceania and Australia right to the West in the Americas, and you have a important role to play. If there is anybody, any of the diplomats, ambassadors, anybody wants to add some final thoughts, please, feel free. We don't have much time, maybe another 5 minutes, and then we're going to have to wrap it up. Anybody? Hi, Commissioner Kamath. I think maybe just something from your side as we end up as chair.
Yes, just to say thank you very much again, Kirtan, for hosting, for Sanusha and Ajay Suklal for providing very pertinent, thoughtful comments on, as sort of outsiders, I guess. It's really good to get views from outsiders on how MIKTA is perceived and how we could add value. And of course, to my four MIKTA colleagues, it's such a pleasure to interact with my four MIKTA colleagues in Pretoria, not just on a professional level, but on a personal level. And just to pick up what you said, Sanusha, about empathy, I think the thing that really strikes me when it comes to these issues of really difficult, challenging global governance issues, whether it's gender or climate or COVID recovery, vaccine nationalism, is the issue of leadership and responsibility. And I'd add, if you're going to talk about empathy, I'd add the words moral leadership and moral responsibility. And I think these are, when you bring together countries across different regions, we obviously have different cultural experiences, different historical experiences, but it helps to come up with a global plan of action and looking at our different policies and practices in these really difficult, challenging global issues. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Take care. Be safe. Be healthy. Good luck.